The Galactic Concord had kept peace among the stars for 12,000 years. Three ancient species had built it after a terrible war that nearly destroyed everything. There were tall beings with gray skin and minds built for calculation. There were warriors with 4 arms and a code of honor older than most planets. There were strange creatures who existed partly in dimensions that others could not see. Together, they had created rules that all species in the galaxy followed. The most important rule was simple. No species should ever grow too powerful. Power led to war. War led to death on a scale that turned living worlds into ash. The Conquered watched all species carefully. They measured growth rates and technological development. They tracked expansion and military capability. When a species grew too fast, the Conquered found ways to slow them down, sometimes through trade agreements, sometimes through careful manipulation of resources. The galaxy stayed balanced, and peace continued. This was how things had always been. This was how things would always be, or so the Conquered believed. The human ship appeared near Prime on what the humans later called a Tuesday. It was small and crude by galactic standards. The hull was made of simple metal alloys. The engine was loud and inefficient. The observation station detected it immediately and sent word to the Conquered Council. A new species had achieved faster than light travel. This happened every few centuries. The Conquered had a process for such events: send observers, make contact, explain the rules, guide the new species into its proper place in the galactic order. The High Observer was chosen to lead the delegation. She had welcomed 11 new species to the galaxy over her long career. She expected humans to be no different. She was wrong. The first meeting took place on the human colony world called New Geneva, and her team landed their elegant silver vessel beside the crude human structures. Humans gathered to watch. They were soft creatures with fragile bodies. They had no claws, no armor, no natural weapons. Their eyes showed too much emotion. They smiled at the aliens with strange openness, spoke to their leaders, and asked the questions the Conquered always asked. How long had humans existed as a species? How long had they possessed technology? How long had they been traveling between stars? The answers made her feel cold. Humans as a species were only 200,000 years old. They had only discovered electricity less than 500 years ago. They had split the atom less than 400 years ago. They had reached their moon less than 400 years ago. And they had built their first faster-than-light engine only 80 years before this meeting. Asked her translator to check the numbers again. The translator confirmed them. The High Observer felt something she had not felt in centuries: fear. That had taken 6,000 years to develop faster-than-light travel. That had taken 4,000. That had taken 8,000. Humans had done it in less than 500 years from their first powered flight to their first jump between stars. But the truly disturbing part came later in the conversation. A human diplomat named Sarah was explaining her people's history. She mentioned something called the Cold War. Two groups of humans had pointed weapons at each other for decades. These weapons could destroy cities in a single flash. They could poison the land for generations. The humans had built thousands of these weapons. They had aimed them at their own planet. Asked why they had not used them, Sarah shrugged. She said that humans had eventually decided that destroying themselves was a bad idea. She said it like it was obvious, like choosing not to end their own species was a simple choice that anyone would make. The delegate leaned forward. He asked if humans still possessed these weapons. Sarah nodded. She said they had even more powerful ones now, but they were kept safe. They were only for defense against external threats. The delegation returned to Conquered Space immediately, submitted her report with a recommendation for immediate high-level review. The intelligence collective received it within hours. Over the next 50 years, the Conquered watched humanity expand across the stars. Every observation made the fear grow stronger. Humans were not like other species. Other species found a stable point and stayed there. They developed slowly and carefully. They respected the natural limits of growth. Humans did not seem to understand limits at all. They colonized worlds that other species had declared impossible: frozen planets, desert planets, planets with toxic atmospheres. Humans just built better shelters and kept going. When they found a problem, they solved it. When they faced death, they fought it. When they lost, they learned and tried again. The conquered had seen ambitious species before. They had ways of handling ambition. Trade restrictions could slow economic growth. Diplomatic pressure could limit expansion. In extreme cases, manufactured conflicts could burn away excess energy. But humans adapted to every obstacle the conquered placed before them. When the restricted trade in certain technologies, humans invented their own versions. When the closed borders to human ships, humans built better engines and went around them. When the spread rumors about human aggression, humans responded by making allies with species the conquered had considered unreachable. The collective ran projections. They calculated growth rates and expansion patterns. They modeled every possible future. The results were always the same. In 800 years, humans would be the dominant power in the galaxy, not through war, not through conquest, simply through growth that nothing could stop. The Conquered Council met in emergency session. Representatives from all three founding species gathered in the great chamber that had seen 12,000 years of careful governance. Now very old, presented the data herself. She showed the growth curves. She displayed the projections. She explained what humanity would become. The war leader spoke first. He said the obvious solution was war. Destroy the humans before they became too strong. His people were warriors. They could end this threat. Shook her head. She explained that the collective had modeled that option. Humans were too spread out now, too numerous. A war of extinction would cost trillions of lives across hundreds of worlds, and there was no guarantee of success. Humans had shown they could survive anything. The elder pulsed with colors that meant deep thought. It spoke of another option. Its people had developed technologies that could fold space itself. They could create a barrier, a prison made of bent dimensions. They could seal humanity away from the rest of the galaxy. The chamber fell silent. Such a thing had never been done. It would require resources from all three species. It would take years to prepare. And there was a problem that everyone saw but no one wanted to speak. Spoke it aloud. The conquered could not simply imprison a species for crimes they might commit in the future. There had to be justification. There had to be a reason that history would accept. The war leader smiled. It was not a kind smile. He said that reasons could be created. If humanity would not provide a justification, then the conquered would provide one for them. He looked at the elder and asked how long the preparation would take. The answered, 5 years for the dimensional barriers, another year for full activation. The war leader nodded. He said that was enough time. He would handle the justification personally. His agents were very good at their work. The humans would never know what happened until it was too late. Felt the weight of what they were planning. She had dedicated her life to the conquered and its peace. She had believed in the rules. She had trusted that the system was good. Now she was helping to condemn an entire species to imprisonment for the crime of being too successful. She voted yes anyway. They all did. The peace of the galaxy required it. The balance had to be maintained. Humanity was simply too dangerous to remain free. The work began that very day. The started building their dimensional prison. The started planning their false flag operation. And somewhere in human space, billions of people went about their lives without any idea that their future had just been decided by creatures they had never met. The ceiling was coming. Humanity's time among the stars was about to end. The ships moved through space with their identification systems turned off. There were 12 of them, painted black, running silent. Inside each ship, specially trained soldiers prepared for the mission that would change galactic history. They wore human-style armor. They carried human-style weapons. Their ships had been modified to emit human energy signatures. War Leader commanded the fleet from the lead vessel. He had served the conquered for 300 years. He had fought in border conflicts and put down rebellions. He had killed when killing was necessary. But he had never done anything like this. 3 colony worlds waited ahead. They belonged to a species called the peaceful beings who had joined the conquered 2,000 years ago. They had no army. They had no defenses. They were allies of the and trusted the conquered completely. Tonight they would die, believing humans had killed them. Felt nothing as he gave the order to attack. Feelings were a luxury that soldiers could not afford. The conquered had given him a mission. He would complete it. Millions would die so that billions could live in peace. The mathematics were simple even if the action was not. The black ships fell upon the first colony like predators on sleeping prey. They burned cities from orbit. They destroyed hospitals and schools and homes. When survivors tried to flee, the ships hunted them down. The soldiers were thorough. They left evidence everywhere. Human weapons, human equipment, human genetic material taken from traders and diplomats who had no idea their DNA was being used. By the time the sun rose on that world, nothing lived there anymore. The second colony received warning. Someone had managed to send a distress call before dying, but warning meant nothing against enemies who could strike from the sky. The ships reduced the second world to ash in less than 6 hours. They made sure to leave survivors this time, traumatized witnesses who had seen human markings on the ships that killed their families. The third colony fought back. They had managed to arm themselves with mining equipment and construction tools. They stood against the attackers with courage that surprised even, but courage could not stop orbital bombardment. The colony fell like the others. Its people died like the others, and the evidence pointed exactly where it was supposed to point. Reported mission success to the conquered council. The government received the reports within hours. They demanded answers from humanity. They demanded justice. When the human ambassador expressed confusion and any knowledge of the attacks, they called her a liar. They showed her the evidence. Human weapons, human ships, human genetic traces at every attack site. The ambassador was a woman named Victoria. She had spent her career building bridges between species. She had believed that understanding could overcome any difference. When she saw the evidence, she knew something was terribly wrong. Humans had not attacked those colonies. She was certain of it. But certainty meant nothing against carefully manufactured proof. They issued a formal condemnation of humanity. They followed. They remained silent, but their ambassadors from human space. Within weeks, humanity stood alone against the united anger of the entire galaxy. Ambassador traveled to the conquered capital to plead her people's case. She brought human experts who analyzed the evidence and found impossible inconsistencies. She presented alternative theories. She begged for a proper investigation. The conquered council listened politely and did nothing. High Observer watched the human woman speak. She saw the desperation in those strange, emotional eyes. She knew that everything said was true. The evidence was false. The attacks had been ordered by the conquered itself, and none of that mattered anymore. The dimensional barriers were almost complete. In 3 months, humanity would be sealed away forever. The ambassador's protests were just noise. Nothing she said could change what was coming. Returned to human space with nothing. She reported to her government that the conquered had already made its decision. Some human leaders wanted to fight. They argued that humanity should strike first before their enemies could act. But fight how? Against 3 ancient civilizations with technologies far beyond human understanding. Other leaders argued for negotiation. Perhaps the conquered could be persuaded. Perhaps this was all a misunderstanding. But how do you negotiate with beings who have already decided to erase you from the galaxy? In the end, humanity did nothing. There was nothing they could do. Most humans went about their daily lives without knowing that anything was wrong. They worked and loved and dreamed of futures that would never come. The great machine of human civilization kept running, ignorant of the knife at its throat. On the day called the Convergence, 98 billion humans lived across 47 worlds. They had spread across a small corner of the galaxy and made it their own. They had built cities that reached toward the sky. They had created art and music and literature. They had raised children who raised children who raised children. They were not perfect beings. They made mistakes and hurt each other and failed at many things, but they were alive and growing and reaching for something more. Then the veil activated. The dimensional barriers snapped into place around human space like a trap closing on its prey. Reality itself bent and folded. The stars beyond the barrier disappeared. The signals from outside stopped. In an instant, humanity was cut off from the rest of the universe. Most humans did not even notice at first. The sun still rose. The planets still turned. Life continued. It was only when astronomers looked at the sky and saw nothing but darkness that the truth became clear. They were alone. The Conquered announced the sealing to the rest of the galaxy. They explained that humanity had been contained after committing terrible crimes against peaceful species. They showed the evidence of the attacks. They expressed sorrow that such action had been necessary. Most species accepted the explanation without question. The Conquered had maintained peace for 12,000 years. Surely they would not act without good reason. Within a generation, humans became a story that parents told their children. A warning about what happened to species who grew too fast and reached too far. Within 3 generations, most beings in the galaxy had forgotten that humans were ever real. They became myths, legends, cautionary tales about the dangers of ambition. Inside the veil, time passed differently. They had designed the prison to contain humanity forever. They had not considered that the dimensional folding would compress time itself. While 1 year passed in the outside galaxy, almost 6 years passed within the veil. Humanity had been given a prison. They did not know it yet, but they had also been given a gift. Time. More time than any species had ever had to grow and change and become something new. The darkness around them was not an ending, it was a beginning. 4,000 years passed inside the veil. Generations of humans lived and died without ever seeing a natural star. They only knew the worlds within their prison and the artificial lights that replaced their stolen sky. At first there was chaos. Governments collapsed. Wars erupted between colonies fighting for resources. Billions died in conflicts that seemed to prove everything the Conquered had believed about humanity. But humans did not stay broken. They never did. A woman named rose from the ashes of the old world. She was not a warrior or a politician. She was a teacher who had lost everything in the wars. She started speaking about something different. She talked about how their prison could become their home. She talked about building instead of destroying. She talked about becoming worthy of the stars they could no longer see. People listened. Not everyone, not at first, but enough. Slowly, carefully, humanity began to rebuild itself. They created new systems of government that learned from every mistake they had ever made. They developed technologies that turned their limited resources into abundance. They solved the problems of disease and hunger and poverty that had plagued them since their beginning. The walls of their prison became a challenge instead of a defeat. Human scientists studied the veil obsessively. They mapped its boundaries. They analyzed its structure. They could not break through, but they learned everything about how it worked. That knowledge led to new understanding of dimensions and reality itself. By the time 1,000 years had passed inside the veil, humanity had transformed. They were no longer the crude young species that the Conquered had feared. They had become something else, something more patient, more wise, more capable than anyone could have imagined. They remembered what had been done to them. They found records from before the sealing. They discovered the truth about the attacks that had been blamed on them. They learned that the conquered had manufactured evidence to justify their imprisonment. For a time, this knowledge burned hot in human hearts. There were calls for revenge, plans for vengeance when the veil finally fell. But 4,000 years was a long time, long enough for anger to cool, long enough for perspective to grow. The humans who first demanded revenge had children who had children who had children. Each generation was further from the pain. Each generation saw the situation more clearly. By the time 3,000 years had passed, the dominant feeling among humanity was not hatred. It was curiosity. What had become of the galaxy they left behind? What had the conquered done with all those centuries? Had anyone remembered them? The veil began to weaken in the year 6347 by the old human calendar. The who built it had been brilliant, but they had not accounted for entropy on such scales. The dimensional barriers slowly degraded. Tiny cracks appeared in the prison walls. Human scientists detected these changes and began preparing. When the barrier finally shattered, it happened all at once. Reality snapped back into its natural shape. The stars returned to the sky, and humanity looked out at a galaxy that had barely changed in 700 outside years. The first human ship to cross the threshold was called the New Dawn. It was not built for war. It was built for exploration, but it was also built to impress. The vessel was massive, larger than some moons, carrying technologies that had been developed over 4 of isolation. Its commander was a man named David, a direct descendant of the ambassador who had tried to prevent the sealing so long ago. They detected the New Dawn almost immediately. Their sensors screamed warnings about impossible readings. A ship that size should not be able to exist. An engine that powerful should not be able to function. The High Command sent urgent messages to the conquered council. The humans had returned. David broadcast his message across all frequencies. He spoke in every language the old records had preserved. He said that humanity remembered what the conquered had done. He said that humanity knew the truth about the false attacks. He said that humanity had spent 4,000 years considering how to respond. Across the galaxy, ancient defense systems activated for the first time in centuries. They mobilized their warrior fleets. They began charging the dimensional weapons that had created the veil. The conquered prepared for the war they had always feared. Then David sent his second message. It included technical specifications for technologies that made everything the conquered possessed look like children's toys. Power systems that could fuel civilizations, weapons that could crack planets, shields that could stop anything. He was showing them exactly what humanity had become. He was also showing them that humanity could destroy the conquered completely if it chose to. The galaxy held its breath. Every species that had forgotten humans now remembered them with terror. Every leader who had grown comfortable with conquered peace now faced the possibility of annihilation. The mathematics were simple. Humanity was stronger now, much stronger. If they wanted revenge, nothing could stop them. David spoke again. His voice was calm, almost gentle. He said that humanity could end the conquered. Every calculation confirmed it. But he said that humanity had not spent 4,000 years becoming their jailers. They had not survived isolation just to become another empire built on conquest and fear. He offered something else instead, a choice. The conquered council gathered in emergency session. High Observer was long dead, but her successors understood what was happening. The humans were not attacking. They were waiting for an answer to a question that no one had expected. The question was simple. What kind of galaxy did the conquered want to live in? Humanity had learned something in their long imprisonment. They had learned that power without wisdom was just destruction waiting to happen. They had learned that vengeance felt good but built nothing. They had learned that the universe was too vast and too strange for any one species to control alone. They were offering the conquered a chance to learn these things too. Some in the council wanted to reject the offer. They argued that it was a trick. They said that humanity was simply waiting for the right moment to strike. They demanded that the conquered fight while it still had some chance of survival. But others saw something different. They saw a species that could have destroyed them and chose not to. They saw technology freely shared instead of hoarded. They saw an open hand instead of a closed fist. And they wondered what kind of beings could suffer what humanity had suffered and emerge offering peace. The elder spoke last. Its colors shifted through patterns that meant deep understanding. It said that the conquered had sealed humanity away because they feared what humans might become. Now they knew. Humans had become something that the conquered could not comprehend, something that should not exist, a species that had every reason for hatred and chose something else instead. The elder said that it was afraid, but it was not afraid of human weapons. It was afraid of human mercy, because mercy required strength that the conquered had never possessed. The vote was not unanimous. It never would be. Some species would never trust humanity. Some would always wait for the betrayal they were certain would come. But enough voted yes. Enough chose to take the hand that was offered. David received word of the decision on the bridge of the New Dawn. His crew watched him read the message. They saw him close his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them, they were wet. His ancestor had failed to prevent the sealing. She had died in the chaos that followed, never knowing what would become of her people. But she had passed down one thing to her descendants, a belief that understanding could overcome any difference, a hope that someday, somehow, things would be different. David sent one final message to the conquered. He said that humanity looked forward to meeting their new partners. He said that there was much work to do. He said that the universe was waiting for them. Then he ordered the New Dawn to stand down from alert status. The weapons that could have ended civilizations went quiet. The shields that could have blocked armies lowered. And the largest human ship in history became just another vessel among the stars. The galaxy would never be the same. The conquered that had ruled through careful control and hidden manipulation would have to change. New relationships would have to be built. Old wounds would have to be healed. It would take centuries, maybe longer, maybe forever. But humanity had time. They had always had time. Even when they were locked away from the universe, they had found ways to grow. Now they were free again, free to reach for the stars they had been, free to become whatever they chose to be. The species that had been sealed away for being too dangerous had returned, and they had brought something with them that the galaxy had never seen before. Not just power, not just technology, but the simple, impossible belief that tomorrow could be better than today. The conquered had feared what humans would become. They should have hoped instead.